Hello, and welcome to Total Mobile Dev Made Fun with Flutter and Firebase. I'm Emily Shack.
I'm Emily Fortuna.
And today we are going to show you just how easy and fun it can be to build your very own mobile app using Flutter live here on stage. But to kick things off, we're going to tell you a little story about our friend, Francine.
Now, Francine was the proud owner of a pet store, and she realized the one thing that she needed for her business was to write a mobile app that would allow people to see her inventory, reserve fish that they were interested, and so then when they came into the store, they would be on hold and they could adopt them. Now, I know that Google I/O is the worldwide gathering of aquarium enthusiasts.
I'm not sure that's quite right, but I do know that we have a lot of mobile developers in the audience. So I think they'll still appreciate this.
All right, well, so it's still relevant. So today we'll be live coding a pet adoption app for fish for Francine on stage. So let's switch over to the devices, and we can see the app that we'll be live coding today. As you see, we have these nice cards with information about the fish. There are nice animations as you can slide between the information about the fish. Some of the fish are even animated. And if you decide that a fish is the right one for you, you can hit that catch button, and then it is reserved. Then you can hop over, and you can see that it has disappeared from the view of the other phone, so no one else can reserve that same fish. Now, if you hop over reserve view, which Emily has, you can see that the fish that she was reserved is available. And if she decides that Dart is not actually the fish that's right for her, then she can swipe up, and it has been cleared from your reservation. And if you decide that you have regret if you let loose the wrong fish, you can shake, and your fish is back reserved. And as you notice, there are all these great sound effects to go along with all of your actions. So let's hop back to the slides. So whether you are creating an app to create a home for unloved marine animals or just coding up that app that you've been talking about for years, what we hope you'll find today is just how easy it is with Flutter to make your vision a reality. One of the great things about Flutter is you can get a native look and feel for both iOS and Android all from a single code base. So you don't have to learn multiple new technologies just to get an app that can serve all of your users. And not only is it a native look and feel, it is an actual Flutter compiles down to native code. So you don't have to sacrifice quality to get a great looking app. One of the reasons that I always look forward to developing in Flutter is hot reload. So all I have to do is type my code into the IDE, hit save, and then it's instantaneously on my phone. The only downside is I no longer have time to make coffee because my code's already running.
Flutter also has many powerful components that you can integrate with that go beyond the scope of Flutter itself. In this talk, we're going to be showing you how to integrate Cloud Firestore, which is an option for your server-side component of your app. You can also integrate the accelerometer. That's how we're showing you shake to undo. And we're also going to integrate those crucial sound effects for the flushing of that fish. And all of this is done in the same code base so that you don't have to deal with the hairy details of those device platform-specific APIs. So I'm going to jump on over to the code base, and we're going to give you a little tour of what we're going to be coding before we go ahead and dive into the coding portion.
So we went ahead and wrote some class declarations for you, because watching us type class declarations is kind of boring. But we'll do a quick overview of what the file looks like. So at the top, we have our main function, our entry point. That's where we're going to be building our top-level widget or component that we're drawing in our app. Our top-level widget is very creatively called My App. My App is in charge of getting the information from Cloud Firestore, or AKA Francine's fish database, and then telling to draw that app as to screen. My App has a fish page and a corresponding fish page state. Now, you'll notice that Fish Page is a stateful widget, whereas all the other widgets you see are stateless widgets. If you remember when we demoed, we had that undo functionality. And so that's some information that we need to store and have a long-running, persistent action of what we last did to the fish. So if we decide that we need to undo that, we have that. So for this reason, we're storing that in Fish Page, so we can have that long-running persistent state. For everything else, we have stateless widgets, so that it can just draw to screen whatever information we provide it. Fish Page has a fish options. That is that center section that allows you to scroll through all the available fish that you are able to adopt. And then Fish Options is made up of many profile cards, and that's the individual cards that you have for your fish. Now, there's probably a few more class declarations in here than you would want to have if you were coding this app for real, but for the sake of live coding, we're putting it all in one file so that it's easy for us to jump around and for you to see what's going on. We do have one more file, though. Hop over to the utils class. There are two classes in it. Fish data is just a convenience class. So when we're writing information to Cloud Firestore, it's going to be in the form of a map. And so fish data takes that map and converts it into a Dart object. And then when we want to write it back to Cloud Firestore, we convert it back to a map. Local Audio Tools is just a wrapper around the Audio Tools function, or plugin, which allows us to play audio files locally from our devices. So let's go back to main. And Emily has our app running up on the devices. So let's switch over to the device view and see what we've got.
OK, I think this is a pretty good app to start out with. Obviously, we have a long way to go here. One thing that I'm noticing right off the bat, though, is that the text in that app bar and in that button at the bottom is a little bit larger than I might have on apps on my phone. Why is that?
That's a good question. So actually, this is a good illustration of Flutter's accessibility features. So if you are vision impaired, or if you are giving a presentation, you want to make sure the people in the back rows are able to see the text, you can set the text size, default text size on your phone to be larger. And Flutter will respond to this and then increase all the text size in the app. So we increase the text size without changing anything in our code itself.
OK, so I know that I can read this app, but there's not really much here that I'm reading yet. Why don't we go ahead and get some content in there? I think the most important thing to start out with is that we have some nautical theming in the background to really show that we're shopping for fish.
Sounds good. So we can do that by setting the color of that center section. So we're in Fish Page state. There's a build method. This is the method that gets called when Flutter wants to draw this widget to screen. Build method exists for every single widget that you have. So here we are constructing a scaffold that provides the outline for its children widgets and where they should be displayed on the screen. Scaffold has an app bar. That's that title bar at the top giving the name of our app. Then we have the bottom navigation bar that allows us to toggle between the two individual views. And then at the bottom, we have this fish options as that main body. So to set the color, Emily's going to wrap this in a container and set the color of the container. Now, why are we wrapping this in another widget rather than just setting the color of fish options directly? This is actually a common design pattern in Flutter to favor composition over inheritance. And if you can imagine, we could potentially have parameters in fish options to set the color and the width and the padding, but you could then maybe have 100 parameters, and it could get pretty overwhelming. Having a composition in the way we build our widgets keeps our APIs much leaner, and it allows us to build a combination of widgets in ways that the API designer maybe originally had never envisioned. So Emily specified Indigo. She's ready. She's hit save. Hot reload is happening. Let's switch over to the devices. There it is. Stare in that forever.
And that was pretty fast, too, sub-second, I would say. So we didn't have to rebuild our entire app to get that to show up. So now, I like the color, but I think it would be nice if we had some content on top of that.
All right, all right. So we can do that by adding that profile card. So in our fish options right now, let's go to that build function. And right now we have a placeholder container. So we're going to get rid of that, and then we're going to construct a profile card. Emily's also constructing a default fish data, because right now we're not connected to our fish database on Cloud Firestore. So fish data just has some placeholder images, placeholder name, and information so that we can see what it looks like before we connect to Cloud Firestore. Now, if you are familiar with Dart, which was what we are using to code, you might be noticing, hey, Emily's constructing this profile card, but she's not using new anywhere. What's with that? Well, this is a good example of how the Dart and Flutter teams have collaborated. Flutter was saying, hey, we have a lot of Flutter users that are noticing that new is cluttering up their code because they're constructing all these widgets. What do we do? So the Dart team made new optional, and this is part of Dart 2.0. So now you can just write a profile card. So Emily's got it all written up. We're going to hit save, and it's going to hot reload. Switch over devices.
All right, we've got a pretty empty card on here. I think what I want most in my viewing of a fish is to see the big picture of the fish.
Okay. So let us modify the profile card. So if we swap back over to the code, inside profile card, let's look at their profile cards build function. That's pretty simple. We're just calling get card contents and wrapping it in a card. That's a material widget. Get card contents does three things. It's calling show profile picture, which is clearly falling down on the job. It is calling show data, and then lastly, show button. So let's go into show profile picture and make it actually display a picture. Take out that container. Instead, Emily's calling fade in image. So usually we're going to be getting an image from Cloud Firestore. So that's a call to the server that's potentially asynchronous data. So when we build, we might not have that data at the moment of building. So for that reason, now you could just pass in an image, but once it has that image data, it might pop in. That could be visually jarring. So instead, Emily's making a fade in image that once we have the image, it will fade into view very nicely. And then lastly, we're specifying the fit. So images have a width and height. And in saying boxfit.cover is saying expand to fill all the available size, even if it means cutting off some part of the image. So Emily's going to hit save, which hot reloads, and we're going to switch over to the devices. Oh, it already faded in. You didn't get to see that. So fast.
All right, we've got our big picture of a fish, but I need to know more about that fish before I decide to adopt it. I want to know the fish's name, its personality.
Yes, that is very important for human-fish bonding. So let's go back to the code. Emily's going to modify show data. And we have declared 3 text widgets. The first one is the name widget. Second one is the music widget, fish's preferred music, and then lastly, preferred pH. And to display those, we're going to wrap those 3 in a column widget, which is going to stack them from top to bottom. So Emily's going to hit save. It's going to hot reload. Go over to the devices. Do we see it? Yes, there it is.
All right, so I can understand now this is Frank. He loves Blubstep. His favorite pH is 7. But the information's a little cluttered right now, and I feel like his name's probably the most important piece of this. So how could I set that apart?
All right. So we can do that by setting the text style. So instead, how about we make it bold, and we could double the font size. That would help it stand out a little bit more. That way people can look up Frank by name. So let's look at the devices again. Oh, that's much better.
Okay, I think we're getting there, but I still think the Frank should be a little bit apart from the rest of the information.
Okay, so back at the code. How about we wrap that text widget in some padding? Now there's a really handy feature with Visual Studio Code, which is what we are currently using. This also works in Android Studio and IntelliJ. You can just wrap a widget inside of another widget. So it takes care of all the indentation for you. So Emily's going to wrap this in some padding. It's done. We're wrapping it in 8 pixels of padding, which is good enough for us. So we're just going to hit save, hot reloading, and look at our devices. Much better.
Okay, so I think that the card is in a pretty good place, but I'm a little tired of looking at Frank. What if we got some real data in there?
I like Frank. But okay. So let's connect to Cloud Firestore. So at the top, that my app, right now, we are passing in an empty list because we're not getting any data from Cloud Firestore. So instead, we're going to be making our call to Cloud Firestore. So there are two different ways that you could deal with asynchronous data because we're making a call to a database or Cloud Firestore to get our information. The first way to deal with asynchronous data is futures or promises, depending on where you're coming from. And this is if you want one bit of data asynchronously. Streams are your other option. Now, streams are if you need multiple pieces of data. In this case, we want a snapshot of all the information on Cloud Firestore, and then when something changes on that database, we want to get a new snapshot of all the fish that are still there. So in this case, stream is the correct option. And then there's this convenient stream builder, which allows us to build widgets from the stream. So Emily has specified the source of the stream. This is from Cloud Firestore. We are getting a collection of fish profiles. And then we are calling the builder to build widgets based on that fish information. You might notice on the line 32, we have this interesting question mark syntax. What's going on there? So what we're saying is data null? If it is, don't call .documents. And then you can return that empty list or assign that empty list to the documents variable. Otherwise, get the documents from Cloud Firestore. And then we're taking that map and converting it to a fish data object. So we have a list of fish data, passing it into fish page. Now, you might be wondering, how are we accessing this Firestore variable? Well, if you scroll up to the imports, you see we have these package imports, particularly Cloud Firestore. Where does that come from? Well, if you go over to pubspec, this is just a YAML file that allows us to specify all of our dependencies for Dart. And the pub, which is our package manager, is able to calculate all of the versioning things, pulls them down from online, sets up all the paths correctly, and then you're good to go. You can just import them. So back to our main file. We have one more change we need to do, because if you recall, Emily constructed that fish data object that was default. It had no information. Now we want to take that stream that we just got from Cloud Firestore and display it. So here she's saying, if we have data, just call the first one, because we're only displaying one card right now. So now Emily's saved, it's hot reloaded. If we switch over to devices, we've got some good data.
Okay, I'm looking at Flo, and I'm feeling pretty good. I think I might want to adopt her, but I'm not really sure how I can do that from this view.
Yeah, catch does not seem to be implemented. So I think it's time to implement that show button. Right now, show button, our onPressed parameter is not doing anything. OnPressed, we're going to pass in a function that is going to be called when the user presses it. And in this case, we want the button to function as a toggle button between reserved and unreserved. And so we're going to be passing these, if it's already reserved, unreserve it. Otherwise, reserve it. These callbacks haven't been implemented yet because we're not writing Cloud Firestore, so let's implement those. Those are in this reserve fish and remove fish. So we're up in the fish page state class right now, which you recall is a stateful widget. So in this case, we're going to be calling setState. That tells the widget, hey, there's something that might have changed in how I displayed, so Flutter, you might want to redraw me. And then Emily's setting the reserved by field to this user ID. That's a unique ID when we sign into Firebase, and it's unique per device. And then remove fish is just the same, except we set the reserved by field to null. So we have to implement our save method. That's going to be actually writing to Cloud Firestore. That's inside fish data. And it's pretty easy. We're going to take our documents reference to that individual fish, and we're going to say set data, and then we mapify our object. So now, when we hit save, our button should be implemented. Let's hop over to the devices. Hot reload should be in action. We got a button. Go reserve it, Emily.
Okay, it's time. It looks like I reserved Flo on the one device, but she's still available to be reserved on the other. So I'm not really sure if I'm going to come into the store and everyone's going to think that they've reserved Flo.
Yeah, we could get in a fight. Everybody wants Flo. I will hop onto the computer, and you can talk us through the rest.
All right. So we have one fish showing. we can reserve it on one phone, but it's not really showing a different fish on the other phone. So what we really want to do is pass in the list of fish that a user can reserve or a user already has reserved to that particular user, rather passing in all of our fish blindly. We want to filter that list. So to do that, we're going to use the .where operator. Now this is an example of functional operators in Dart. You can use the .where operator, or if you were paying close attention when I was implementing the Cloud Firestore piece of this, you would have seen the .map operator. Both of these are examples of functional operators, and in this case, we are iterating over every item in the all fish list and only returning a list of fish that meet the qualifications that the user has either reserved the fish or the fish is not reserved by anyone. Now, if we're in that reserved view, which is our shopping cart view, then we only want to display the fish that are reserved by the current user. So now, when we hot reload and switch over to the devices, we should be able to see a new fish displayed.
Emily, I broke it.
So it's not looking good. We have the red screen of doom. But it seems that we've encountered an error, so let's try to debug this here. When you hit an error in Flutter, it's going to show up on your devices in this red screen with a very helpful error message. This error message is going to be a little bit more concise than the more verbose version that you would see in your debug console. But let's see if we can debug it from here. It looks like from the phones, it said something like type where iterable is not a subtype of type list. So probably what was happening was that when we converted using the where operator, it was converting to an iterable rather than a list, because it was doing that a little bit lazily and not converting to a list until it had to. We want to explicitly convert to a list. So let's go ahead and do that.
I accidentally closed out of the file. I'm rerunning it.
All right, so this is an example of why hot reload is so handy. We appear to have accidentally stopped the app, and it's going to take a long time to restart it. With hot reload, you don't have to wait all of that time. So, I believe if we switch back to the code, we're still going to need to implement that .list, or .toList. Oh, okay, I see. I've already done that. All right, how are the phones doing?
We're waiting for iPhone.
It takes so long.
No.
Really good selling point for Flutter. I bet all of you mobile developers in the audience can relate to this problem. This is why Emily is drinking so much less coffee and tea after switching to Flutter and using hot reload. All right, why don't we switch to slide 19, which is our backup.
We're back.
Oh, never mind. We're going to go over to the devices and see it's working so fast. Hot reload really saved us there. All right, now I know that you didn't quite get to see this because we had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but hot reload can actually hot reload past errors. So if the devices had stayed connected and we'd been able to hot reload, it would have shown up just like this, instead of us having to quit out of the app after we'd hit an error, which can be really handy. In this case, we're seeing that when we reserve a fish now, the fish has disappeared from the other phone. It appears we're back to Frank.
There you go. Very good.
Okay, I think probably Firebase just had a little bit of time to load those fish. Now when we reserved Flow, Flow is no longer available on the other phone. Great. Perfect. All right. But I don't know. Something doesn't seem quite right.
Yeah, Emily, I'm not really digging Marlon Brando. I would like to have some other options to adopt.
That's true. We're only seeing one fish right now. But as we all know, there are plenty of fish in the sea. And we would like to give you the option to adopt all of them. So why don't we go ahead and switch back to the code, and we're going to try and implement a cover flow widget. Now this is a widget that we are getting with another plugin, just like we got the Firestore plugin, and that's the simple cover flow plugin. Now cover flow takes in two arguments. It takes in an item builder and an item count. Item builder is going to take in just basically the same code that we had before. We're just going to change that index in fish to make sure that when we're displaying multiple cards, we're not displaying flow every single time. Then we're passing in the length of the fish list to item count so that we're not going to scroll infinitely through cover flow. Now, we should be able to hot reload and switch over to the phones.
Oh, this is so much better. Look at all these fish I could adopt. I could adopt Gale the whale, except I don't think I have space for Gale the whale. Can I do that?
I think you might have gone a little overboard there. But why don't we try and see how we can remove a fish from that reserved view? That seems like a pretty handy use case for our users. So back to the code. We're going to implement 2 more arguments on that cover flow. We're going to add a dismissible items argument, and that's going to tell cover flow whether it should be able to dismiss cards by dragging up or down and having those disappear from the list. We're also adding in a callback, a dismissible callback, and that's going to be triggered whenever we do dismiss a card from the list. And that's just going to be using the same onRemove callback that we implemented before. So let's go back to the devices, hot reload, and see that in action. And I think I saw,
yep. Gale is available for anyone else to reserve. Except I don't have space for Gale the whale, but I think my parents have space for Gale the whale. I do want to adopt her. What do I do?
Okay. So we don't want to dismiss a fish and then instantly regret it. We want to give the user the option to get that fish back in. So this is where we're going to integrate the accelerometer. So for this, we're going to implement a very simple undo functionality. We need, first of all, our fish data to store the fish that has last been undone, or the fish that has last been removed from the list, so that we can undo that later on. So we're going to keep track of that variable and then go ahead and set it whenever we remove a fish. Now, this is a pretty simple version of undo. We're only going to be able to remove 1 fish at a time, but you can imagine some more complex version where we're removing multiple fish. For our purposes, this is going to work just fine. So now we're going to need to actually trigger an undo with the accelerometer. Here we're implementing an init state method on fish page state. All stateful widgets actually have this init state method, but a lot of the time it's implicit and can just default to the default implementation. It's going to be called whenever we start up that state. In our case, we want to introduce our own logic, so we're going to explicitly write it out. Here we're going to initialize a listener onto the accelerometer events stream. That stream is something that we're getting from the sensors plugin. Now, we're going to listen to these events in the background, and it's going to throw us back any accelerometer events that it finds where the phone has moved in some way. In our case, we want to trigger a shake whenever the phone has accelerated in the x-axis by at least 2 meters per second. And we also want to trigger an undo if we recognize that undo data is null and we're in that reserved view. So I believe, yes, we have to impose our less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to 2 to make sure that we have some threshold there. And then when we go ahead and you think I'm about to say hot reload, but I'm actually not. There's another function here that we can use called hot restart. Hot reload is actually going to be stateful and bring you back to your current state in the app. Hot restart is a little bit different. Because we have these init state calls and maybe some calls in our main function before we built the widgets, those aren't going to get rerun when we do a stateful hot reload. We want to fully restart the app to display our new changes. But a hot restart is better than a full restart in that it's a lot faster. It's actually almost as fast as a hot reload. So we've hot restarted, and we can jump on over to the phones.
So I'm reserving Gale, remove, and she's back.
Perfect, and she's disappeared from the other phone.
You know what would really be the icing on the cake, though?
What's that?
If we had sound effects.
Okay. Yeah, those are pretty important in any fully featured app that's trying to be a little bit whimsical. So we want to incorporate sound effects using our local audio tools class, which is calling the audio tools plugin. So here, we are going to, in the top of our main function, we're going to load a couple audio files, our background audio and our removed audio. We're also going to initialize an audio loop on that background audio so that when we start up the background audio, it keeps playing until we may be interrupted with a different audio file. So this would be a good time to pause and talk a little bit about asynchronous functions in Dart. You'll notice that the main function is marked with the async keyword. that means that it's asynchronous and is going to return a future or a promise of a value that's going to come a little bit later on. It's also calling two more asynchronous functions. We have this Firebase auth sign in anonymously call, as well as our audio tools load file call. Both of these are asynchronous, but we're handling these in two different ways. In the first case, we're using the await keyword. And what that's saying is that we're dealing with an asynchronous function, but we really don't want the rest of our main function to continue until this one has completed, until the future has completed. So we're going to call await, and that's going to pause execution on everything after that await call in our main function. For audio tools, we're using the .then operator, and that's going to pause execution of everything inside of that body of the operator, but it's not going to pause execution on anything else. So in our case, we want to wait for the file to be loaded before we can play it, but we don't care if the rest of the app builds a little bit before we've loaded our file. So we have one more place to incorporate audio, which is that whenever we remove a fish, of course we want to have a nice sound effect there as well. So we're just going to call play audio, and then we should be ready to switch back to the apps, or to the devices. So we can do another hot restart this time, and then switch over. And we should be able to hear some ocean breeze sounds in the background, as well as that crucial flushing noise when we dismiss a fish. Yeah, what do you think?
That looks good.
I think our app is pretty good. So why don't we go ahead and deliver this to Francine? Let's go back over to the slides. And this app is a huge success with Francine. She's so excited. She delivers it to her customers, and it drives business by over 300%, all because of Flutter. But how did we get here? Well, using Flutter, we were able to achieve a native, customizable look and feel for both iOS and Android from a single code base. But not only was it a native look and feel, we also did really compile down to native code under the hood. So we didn't have to make any sacrifices in quality or customizability. We also integrated with Cloud Firestore, which gave us all of that fish data that updated in real time. And finally, we integrated our device level controls, the accelerometer and sound, to get that app really fully featured. And all of this, all of that functionality, hard to believe, but it was done in 310 lines of code. That's everything we wrote in advance of the talk and everything we showed you today. So that's pretty low.
Flutter is currently in beta. What does that mean? Well, it means we support right to left layouts in case you're writing a fish adoption app around the Dead Sea. It means we support internationalization, also related for that Dead Sea app. It means that we support accessibility, as you saw in our current app. Flutter has apps in all sorts of industries. We have finance, health, music, travel. Here are just some of the brands and companies that are writing Flutter apps. I want to highlight 3 of them for you. The first one is Hamilton. If you haven't heard of Hamilton, I'm sorry, you probably don't live in the US. This is the name of the hit Broadway musical that is about Alexander Hamilton, and their official app is written using Flutter. It has over 1 million downloads and over 500,000 monthly active users. On the left, you see AdWords, which is the multi-billion-dollar product by Google that helps keep the lights on in Google. And their new app is also written in Flutter and is going to be released soon. On the right, we have Alibaba, which is a top 10 internet company, and their new mobile app is written in Flutter, and they're in the process of releasing it to users now. If you want to learn more about Flutter, we have so many great resources for you. First, check out flutter.io. That's where you have information about how to download it, set it up on your computer. There's documentation. We have a Udacity Flutter course. If you want to learn about it right now, you should run over to the Code Labs. We have a whopping 9 Code Labs about Flutter and Dart. And at various points between today and tomorrow, you might see someone that looks kind of like this and someone that kind of looks like this helping out. Also, we have a sandbox. There's the Flutter Firebase, and Cloud Sandbox. We have a great section of goodies there. There's this hot reload game, which is pretty fun. Emily, have you played it?
I have actually played the hot reload game. It's great. It's also a great example of how you can get really good-looking 2D animations working in Flutter.
And there is one more talk tomorrow that is about how you can set up good design patterns for your Flutter apps. So say you're like, I have so many widgets, how do I manage them and how do they talk to each other? You should go to this talk tomorrow. And there was one more talk that happened earlier today, and if your time machine is not in order, you should check it out on YouTube, and pretty soon. Here is the code that we wrote today. This link will also be out in 2 slides. We'd love to have your feedback. Go to the I/O webpage, and then the link, that's still there. Thank you so much. It was great to share Flutter with you. We will take questions in the Flutter sandbox. And adopt a lobster.